Ready for a journey. One where cultures clash and secrets simmer right below the surface.
Sounds intense.
It is. Today we're going deep into a book called Season of Migration to the North.
Oh, by Tayeb Salih. I've heard of this one.
Yeah, it's considered a really important work in modern Arabic literature. We're going to use excerpts from the book itself
Of course.
and also some expert analysis. There's this great book by Wael S. Hassan.
Okay, so using both the novel and the critical analysis.
Exactly. We'll uncover the book's major themes and how it tackles colonialism.
I'm interested to hear about that.
And we'll also discuss its impact on both Arabic and Western literature. It's a powerful book.
I can imagine. So what kind of story are we dealing with here?
Okay, so picture this. A Sudanese man journeys to England. He has these tangled relationships with European women.
Oh, that already sounds complex.
It gets even more intense. There's this shocking event that totally shakes up a peaceful village. And that's just the beginning.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just a simple love story or something.
Not at all. It really opens up this whole world reshaped by colonialism. You see how personal journeys get all tangled up with these cultural clashes.
I see. So it's more about the bigger picture, the effects of colonialism on people's lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so captivating. It goes beyond the individual story and makes you think about those larger forces at play.
It makes you wonder about the individual versus the system, right? How much agency do we have when these historical forces are shaping our lives?
Precisely. And that's what makes it so relevant, even today. I mean, we still see those legacies of colonialism playing out in the world.
For sure. So this book is considered one of the most significant works in modern Arabic literature.
Yeah, it's often compared to the classic works of literature that deal with colonialism, like Heart of Darkness.
Right, right. By Joseph Conrad.
Exactly. But this book flips the script. You get the perspective of the colonized, which is something you don't often see in Western literature.
Yeah, that's crucial. It challenges those traditional narratives and forces us to reconsider those power dynamics.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of post-colonial criticism comes in.
Right, that lens that helps us see things differently.
Exactly. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. Suddenly you see all these lasting effects of colonialism that you might not have noticed before.
It helps you unpack those layers of meaning that are embedded in our culture, our language, everything.
Totally. It's about deconstructing those narratives that have been imposed on us and reclaiming our own stories.
So how does Season of Migration to the North fit into all of this? How does it use this post-colonial perspective?
Well, let's dive into the story a bit. We're taken to this fictional village in Sudan called Wad Hamid.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. And in Wad Hamid, we see these Arab and African cultures blending together. It's a place where tradition meets modernity, where those boundaries start to blur.
Sounds like a rich setting, full of potential for conflict and change.
Absolutely. And that's where we meet our main character, Mustafa Saeed.
Okay, so he's the one who goes to England.
Yes. And his journey is fascinating, but also really troubled. He embodies all those contradictions of colonialism.
Oh, so?
Well, he embraces certain aspects of Western culture. You know, he goes to study there, he gets educated in their system.
Right.
But at the same time, he resists its influence. He's constantly pushing back against those colonial ideas and trying to carve out his own identity.
So he's caught between two worlds, in a sense. Embracing and rejecting the West at the same time.
It's that constant tension. And it leads to some pretty destructive behavior, especially in his relationships with women.
I was wondering about that. You mentioned tangled relationships with European women.
Yeah, and those relationships are really at the heart of the novel. It's like he's using those Western stereotypes about the exotic East.
Oh, to manipulate them.
Exactly. He plays into their fantasies and uses it to his advantage.
It's almost like he's turning the tables on colonialism in a way.
Yeah.
Right, using their own prejudices against them.
It's a complex dynamic. And Salih doesn't shy away from depicting the violence that's inherent in those relationships.
Right, because power imbalances always lead to some form of violence, don't they?
Exactly. And we see both sides of it, the violence inflicted by the colonizer and the violence that's internalized by the colonized.
It's like a cycle of trauma that perpetuates itself through these relationships.
Exactly. And it's through Mustafa's journey that we see that cycle play out in all its complexity.
So tell me more about his journey. What happens after England?
Eventually, he returns to Sudan, shrouded in mystery.
Of course, he has to go back eventually.
And his return to Sudan brings a lot of questions. Back in Wad Hamid, there's this shocking murder-suicide that rocks the whole village.
Oh, wow, that's intense.
It really exposes the darkness beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful community. Makes you wonder, what secrets did Mustafa bring back with him?
It makes you think about the lasting effects of trauma, right? How it can manifest in unexpected ways.
Exactly. And it also raises questions about the nature of colonialism itself and how its violence permeates everything.
So we have Mustafa, who's this complex, troubled figure grappling with the effects of colonialism. But there's also another important character, right? The narrator.
You're right. And the narrator's story runs parallel to Mustafa's. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Two different perspectives on this shared experience of colonialism.
Exactly. And the narrator is this Western-educated Sudanese man. Imagine returning home after years abroad, filled with all these hopes for the future.
Full of optimism, ready to make a difference.
Exactly. But then you're confronted by the reality of your own culture, all its complexities and contradictions.
It's that moment of disillusionment, isn't it? When the ideal clashes with the real.
And that clash is at the heart of the narrator's journey. He becomes fascinated by Mustafa, but he also struggles to understand him.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. You have these glimpses into Mustafa's past, but you can never fully grasp his motivations.
It's that constant mystery, that ambiguity that draws the narrator in. And through his eyes, we see the pervasive impact of colonialism and how it shapes not just individuals, but entire societies.
So the narrator is almost like a stand-in for the reader, in a way, right?
Mm.
We're also trying to make sense of these complex issues alongside him.
Totally. And his struggle to reconcile tradition with modernity is something that I think a lot of people can relate to, especially in today's world where everything's changing so fast.
Yeah, that tension between holding on to our roots while also embracing new ideas and ways of being, it's a universal struggle.
And it's not just the narrator who wrestles with these questions. Wad Hamid is full of characters who are grappling with these same tensions.
Oh, I'm sure. So the village itself becomes a microcosm of these larger changes happening across Sudan, even the Arab world.
Exactly. Think of Wad Hamid as a stage where those tensions between tradition and modernity are playing out.
So it's not just about individuals. It's about how colonialism affects entire communities, how it shapes the fabric of society itself.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so powerful. It's not just a story, it's a reflection of our own world and the forces that continue to shape it.
It makes you question those narratives that we often accept as truth, those stories that have been passed down through generations.
And it challenges us to confront those uncomfortable truths and to re-examine the way we see the world.
To decolonize our minds, basically.
Exactly. And to recognize the ongoing impact of colonialism on our lives, even today.
So how do we do that? How do we begin to unravel those narratives and see things from a different perspective?
Well, I think the first step is to engage with stories like Season of Migration to the North that dare to challenge those dominant narratives.
That makes sense. By hearing different voices, by immersing ourselves in these complex stories,
Yeah,
we can start to see the world with fresh eyes.
absolutely. And that's what we're going to do today as we dive deeper into Season of Migration to the North.
I'm ready to go deeper.
Great, because to understand the book's real power, we need to look at some of the most striking scenes.
Oh, I love those close readings, the little details that reveal so much.
Right. And we also have to look at the symbolism woven throughout the story.
It's like a secret code waiting to be deciphered.
Totally. And trust me, there are some moments in this book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it. For example, there's this one scene where Mustafa, completely drunk, starts reciting English poetry.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you think that means?
Well, it's layered, right?
Well,
It reveals how Mustafa uses Western culture as a weapon and a mask.
so it's a performance of sorts.
Exactly. It's meant to both captivate and repel.
He's using their own language, their own art, to challenge them in a way.
It's brilliant. And then there's this other moment where the narrator discovers a collection of Mustafa's personal documents. Things like passports, letters, little glimpses into his past.
Oh, that's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? Each document reveals something new about him.
Exactly. It deepens the mystery surrounding him and makes you question everything you thought you knew. And then the tension keeps building. There's this incredibly tense encounter between the narrator and Husna.
Who's Hausner?
She's Mustafa's widow. And in this scene, you can practically feel the unspoken truths hanging in the air as they talk about Mustafa's past.
Oh, I bet that's full of subtext and hidden meanings.
It's one of those moments that you have to read closely to really appreciate all the nuances. And then, of course, there's the discovery of Wadre's and Hosna's deaths.
Wait, so they both die?
Yes, and it's this brutal act of violence that sends shockwaves through the village.
Wow. So that peaceful facade is totally shattered.
Exactly. And it forces everyone to confront the darkness that's been lurking beneath the surface all along.
It's like Salih is saying that you can't escape the past, those legacies of colonialism and violence.
Huh.
They always come back to haunt you.
Exactly. And it makes you think about how those systems of power, both colonial and patriarchal, intertwine to create these cycles of oppression.
It's heavy stuff, for sure. But it's also what makes Season of Migration to the North such a powerful and thought-provoking book.
Absolutely. It's not just a story, it's a reflection of our own complex world and those legacies that continue to shape us.
And it encourages us to look closer, to examine those uncomfortable truths that we often try to ignore.
Exactly. And to recognize that the personal is always political, that our individual lives are deeply connected to those larger historical forces.
And sometimes by understanding the past, we can gain a better understanding of the present and maybe even create a more just future.
That's the hope, anyway. And that's why I think Season of Migration to the North is such an important book to read, even today.
It gives us a framework for understanding those complexities, for navigating this world that's still grappling with the legacies of colonialism.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that the stories we tell and the stories we choose to believe have the power to shape our understanding of the world.
So, what are some of the key themes that Salih explores in the novel? How does he use these stories to challenge our understanding of history and identity?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what we'll delve into in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm ready when you are. So where were we?
Oh, yeah, those striking scenes and symbols.
Right, the ones that give us a deeper understanding.
Like that secret room the narrator finds in Mustafa's house.
Oh yeah, the one crammed with all those Western books.
It was like opening a Pandora's box. All that knowledge, but also this sense of alienation.
You know, it's like he's trapped between those two worlds.
Right. The room almost becomes a character itself.
Oh, definitely. And then the narrator burning it down. It's such a raw moment.
Yeah, like he's trying to erase the past.
But also maybe his own feelings. So much is left open to interpretation.
Definitely makes you think. But, okay, we've talked about the setting, characters, even the plot.
But what are the core themes Salih's exploring?
That's what I was thinking. What are the big takeaways?
Well, the impact of colonialism is huge, right? How those scars can linger for generations.
Like Mustafa's story, it's tragic how those wounds never really heal.
It makes you think about how history shapes the present and those relationships with the European women.
They weren't just about romance, were they? They really showed those power imbalances.
Exactly. Salih shows how colonialism touches everything, even personal relationships.
It's like this web, hard to escape. And that brings us to identity. The narrator's struggle feels so relatable.
Totally, that feeling of not belonging.
It's like being caught between worlds. Have you ever felt that, listener?
Salih doesn't offer easy answers, does he? Belonging is a journey.
And then that tension between tradition and modernity, Wad Hamid becomes like this microcosm.
Right, like the village is a world in transition. We see it everywhere, not just places affected by colonialism.
How do we adapt to a changing world but keep our traditions? Tough question.
And Salih doesn't hold back on critiquing different ideologies either.
He challenges those Arab intellectuals looking to Europe as a model. It's more complex than that.
Exactly. Blending cultures isn't simple when there's a power imbalance.
He also critiques both the post-colonial governments and traditional ways of thinking. Be more nuanced.
Critical thinking, questioning everything. That's what makes this book so rewarding. It's not black and white.
Earlier you mentioned Mustafa as an anti-Kurtz, disrupting the usual colonial narrative.
Right, by showing him manipulating those women, he flips the script. The colonized can be powerful too.
It raises questions about agency, how we respond to oppression.
Both Mustafa and the narrator, they challenge those easy categories of identity. It's messy, like real life.
That's where the power lies, right? Questioning everything, those legacies that still affect us.
It stays with you, prompting reflection.
We've covered so much. Plot, characters, themes, even symbols. This book is layered.
But we haven't even talked about Salih's language.
Oh, it's poetic and raw at the same time. Those descriptions, you practically feel the heat of Sudan.
And then the narrator's inner thoughts, you're right there with him.
It's masterful. Even in translation, the themes resonate across cultures. Trauma, identity, tradition versus modernity.
They transcend boundaries, reminding us of the universality of human experience.
But for those feeling overwhelmed, what's the best way to unpack this novel?
Pay attention to those recurring motifs. The Nile, the journey north, that room of books.
Like keys unlocking deeper meaning.
And consider all the different viewpoints. Each character adds a piece to the puzzle.
Salih wants us to actively engage, to come to our own conclusions.
No easy answers here. It's about wrestling with the ideas, the implications.
A book demanding our attention, pushing us to confront uncomfortable truths.
And in doing so, we expand our understanding of history, culture, even ourselves.
Season of Migration to the North reminds us that stories shape our world. As we've been talking about all these layers in the book, it hit me that Season of Migration to the North also tackles the idea of justice.
Oh, interesting.
But not in like a straightforward way. It's more about right and wrong accountability, those lingering consequences.
That's fascinating because Salih doesn't give you one clear answer about justice.
Right.
You get these multiple perspectives, even conflicting ones.
So it's up to the reader to decide.
Exactly. What does justice even mean in this world? It makes you think.
It does, like that courtroom scene with Mustafa on trial.
Oh, yeah.
He's being judged by a system that doesn't get him.
And even his own lawyer is more performing than defending.
Exactly. It makes you question who defines justice, whose voices are even heard.
It's not just about rules, but understanding the whole context.
And then Mustafa points out the hypocrisy of it all.
Oh, right.
He's in prison for his crimes, but reminds everyone that the British Empire
Is built on violence.
Exactly. Those double standards are everywhere.
The colonizers often avoid accountability, while the colonized are held to a different standard.
And this idea of accountability goes beyond the legal system, too.
Oh, how so?
You see it in those personal relationships, like with those European women.
Right, those relationships had destructive consequences.
Salih makes everyone accountable. He wants us to see how both colonizers and decolonized.
Contribute to those cycles.
It makes you think about how our actions have a ripple effect. We're all connected.
Especially relevant today with all the discussions about social justice, historical accountability.
Season of Migration to the North reminds us that justice isn't static. It's an ongoing process.
We have to confront the past and work towards a better future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious about the book's legacy. Why does it still resonate today?
Well, the themes are timeless, right? Colonialism, identity, belonging. We're still dealing with them.
Salih tapped into something universal about being human.
Exactly. And the book itself is so well written. The language, the symbolism, it's stunning.
Even that ambiguous ending keeps you thinking.
It's a book that stays with you, makes you question, search for meaning.
Maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Season of Migration to the North.
We're forced to question the nature of truth and how our experiences shape history.
It reminds us that the stories we tell have so much power. They shape how we understand the world.
Powerful stuff.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to explore this book for yourselves. Dive into that rich language, those complex characters, those challenging ideas.
It's a journey you won't forget.
And that's it for our deep dive into Season of Migration to the North. We hope you enjoyed this exploration.
And that it sparks some new ideas and perspectives.
Thanks for joining us.